I've now got one of my favourite people in the studio with me. It's Ralph Schoellhammer, political theorist over from Vienna.
Also gorgeous, also gorgeous.
Also gorgeous, may I just add. Indeed, yeah. I wasn't going to say that. That'll make me blush. Now, we were just having an interesting conversation during the break, and I kind of feel that we'll get onto these a bit later. Let's kind of continue that. We've just spoken about what Trump might mean and might mean for Europe, and this tidal wave of populism that is spreading across the European continent as well. You've just had a little bit of that stardust in Austria, and what this might mean actually for the Western world, and whether we're now at tipping point, Brexit being that first domino, and perhaps that whole sort of house of cards of that liberal leftist elite is finally falling down.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we have is a renormalization. And the renormalization, what I mean by this is if you look at Donald Trump, right, his opponents always like to paint him as like an abnormal figure. He's like Sam Harris. I said, he's not normal. You cannot vote for somebody who's out of the bounds of normalcy. But that was exactly his appeal, because all over the West, as you just mentioned, decline has become the new normal. And that's something that people don't like, right? We want to live, everybody wants to live in a society that is rising, that is on the ascent, and not one that is managing its decline. So the so-called abnormalcy of people like Trump, of the decision like Brexit, of the Austrian Freedom Party, of the AfD in Germany, is because they say, no, we don't have to manage our decline. We can actually turn the ship around, and that's attractive.
It's very human to say we don't want a load of people from different countries now coming into our country. We're kind of built that way as tribal species, you would think. And it's very human to say, I want to procreate, have a family and be able to bring them up. And it's very human to say, guess what, there are men and women and nothing in between. I mean, it is, like you said, it's sort of, the fact that this has now been painted as madness over the last decade or two is the clapback is happening. Talking about the clapback, well, Keir Starmer has promised to crack down on migrant smugglers. He's signed deals with 3 Balkan countries within hours: Serbia, North Macedonia and Kosovo. He's determined to smash the gangs. I mean, it sounds good on paper. I'm not saying it doesn't need to be done, but I think there's, a long way to go than just doing that.
No, and I think this can always be part of a migration deal if you want, right? You can play different fields, but the point is always the same, which is you protect your borders at your borders. I mean, the Australians have been doing this quite efficiently, right? I mean, you say, they had, I think, this huge leaflet campaign once where they distributed leaflets in Vietnam and other countries where there was this boat on high seas and it says, you will not come to Australia. It sounds very brutal, but honestly, I looked it up, there are 900 million adults in the world who want to leave their country, not including their families, just the adults, right? Not including the children, all the other things. You cannot do that. Right? Britain does not have enough space. It doesn't have the economic power to accept 900 million. Europe doesn't have it. Nobody has it. So I think this idea that we cannot protect our borders, so we make deals with Turkey, we make deals with Serbia, we make deals with these Balkan states. That's not how this works. You protect the borders where they are, and then gradually, right, you can add these other things to it. But that alone is not going to do it.
I mean, I learned the other day that a lot of these dinghies, which are being custom-made probably in China and then shipped across to be deployed in Calais, are stored in massive warehouses in Germany, and the Germans, given their interesting past with a certain Austrian, don't have surveillance. In their constitution, they say we don't have surveillance for for sort of reasons of matters past. So how on earth, if the German police, they'd have to change their constitution to get the policing job we need done to make sure those boats don't end up coming across the channel?
Well, they always say they don't have surveillance, but as you then find out that all of a sudden, sometimes they can have surveillance. You see the same now with the French, right? And by the way, when you talk about Britain, apparently Britain has quite good surveillance when you post something on Facebook. They just don't have surveillance if somebody wants to cross the border. And the problem is, you and I talk about policy, but I think what we have to talk about even more is the willingness of politicians or certain politicians to really do something about it. Because the problem in Germany, the problem in the UK is that whether it's Starmer or Scholz or Habeck, you name it, or whether it was Biden in the United States, they talked about the problem because they knew it was important to the voters, but they didn't really want it to solve it.
Why do they not want to solve it?
Because it comes back, and I've been saying this on this show in the Netherlands every game, and it is the truth, because they believe that mass migration is the atonement. It's like a kind of blood money, for a blood guilt of our historical past for all the sins that Europe and the West and Britain has committed. I mean, look at the best example just recently. The idea that the UK has to pay reparations for slavery as being the one country that did more than any other country to abolish slavery is turning history upside. It's completely absurd. But the point is, we have marinated and socialized both newcomers to this country, but also our own youth, in this complete absurd self-hating worldview. And that, I believe, is a bigger danger than anything else. I mean, take the funny part. If you look, Trump's slogan was "Make America Great Again." How can anybody be against that? I mean, just from the pure name.
Yeah.
It's your country. If someone says, make Britain great again, right? Make Europe, whatever. How can you be against that? But the very fact that, particularly in the quote-unquote intellectual class, so many people just recoil from the idea of making your country. No, not our country. It should be the UN.
Oh, don't like your own country.
And that's the big problem. And we have to talk about this. You cannot be a great nation if nobody believes in the nation anymore.
Do you know, do you know what my suspicion is? That you've got Germany now, especially pushing for this free movement of under 30s. And,
Always the Germans.
We don't information share anymore. Now, after Brexit, we don't share all that police data in trade for that allow free movement for under 30s. I have a feeling they want to offload their boatmen to us, their migrants to us. That's what that's all about.
No, it is, and the Germans playing it kind of, you know, it's a double game that they're playing, because whatever the government does, they're still funneling a lot of money to these NGOs that, on the one hand, cooperate with human traffickers, but they're also behind, for example, trying to get people, if they want to leave Germany, go to the UK. I mean, this is another thing we have to talk about. Like, there needs to be a complete, you know, evaluation of all these NGOs. I mean, it's so absurd.
Right.
They are called non-governmental organizations.
Yeah.
Why are they constantly colluding with the government? It's completely absurd.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, at least Italy started clapping down on that.
Yes.
Ralph, it's been great having you in the studio. Come back again soon
Anytime.
from Vienna.